Welcome back to Free Speech Nation. With a future NHS trial costing $11 million to ascertain the effectiveness of puberty blockers on children suffering from gender dysmorphia, isn't it strange that the same people who normally treat lived experience as if it's gospel seem willing to ignore the experience of detransitioners? Isn't that common sense that those who know more will know more about the effects of puberty blockers more than anyone are those who have taken them? So they haven't been listened to, and joining me now in the studio to discuss this is the director of GenSpec UK, Carrie Clark. Carrie, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, Joe.
Let's very quickly just sum up where we are with this trial. What happened was CAS report came out a few years ago now and basically said we don't have the evidence. And now it seems like the NHS is determined to get some evidence.
Well, the CAS review did recommend a puberty blocker trial, but it also recommended a whole programme of research on a variety of different things. Crucially, one thing it recommended was the data linkage study. So that would take data from child gender identity clinics and match it up with the data from the adult clinics and try to find out what's actually happened to all of the children that have already been treated with these experimental treatments.
Because this trial is only asked, it's for a 2-year trial, right? So you wouldn't actually find out the long-term impact of these drugs anyway.
No, it's not capable of bringing in any of the long-term data that we need. And again, if we're going to look at detransition rates, as you mentioned in the introduction, then we really need that long-term data. It actually takes between 7 to 11 years for people to begin to experience transition regret.
Yeah.
So it's really important that we get that.
Yeah, so I mean, talking about detransitioners, there are people now like Kira Bell, who sort of famously took the NHS to court, I believe, on this matter. And why is it that it's not? Why has the NHS not just sort of ignored them? Have they got an issue with detransitioners, that it doesn't fit into the narrative that they're trying to push?
Well, yeah, I think the problem is that detransitioners are the casualties of the experiment that the NHS has already done over the last 15 years. And they're reluctant to confront that because it really shows that they've made a huge mistake and this whole thing has been a medical scandal.
Yeah, I mean, is this going to be, do you think, some kind of loophole that's going to allow... Because Wes Streeting seems to have been quite strong on this stuff. He came out with the CAS review, he said that it was, that he would follow its recommendations, and when Labour got into power, they did continue the ban of puberty blockers. But this then seems to be, having an £11 million trial, seems to be, is this a way of getting it through the back door?
Yeah, I mean, it's a ban in name only, really, because people are going to continue to be able to get puberty blockers through this trial. And we have to think whether there are really any children that it's appropriate to put on this medical pathway. We know that 98% of them will continue to sterilise in cross-sex hormones. So we really need to think about whether there is any justification for going ahead with this. And I think Wes Streeting's been really compassionate. I think he really has tried to listen, but I think everybody needs to have a little bit more courage. We need to address this kind of foundational myth that there are some children for whom sterilisation and cross-sex hormones and surgeries are the right thing.
Because this is what it is. There's evidence that these puberty blockers will have, in and of themselves, negative biological impact, right, on their future in terms of bone density. And then, of course, the fact that such a high percentage of people, 90+% of people, will go on to cross-sex hormones as well, which have their own side effects here. So it just seems bizarre that you're going to be treating children with a drug that will also harm them.
Yeah, oh, for sure. And we at GenSpec, we run a project called Beyond Trans that provides counselling services to detransitioners. It's actually the only specialist service for detransitioners. And they have incredibly complex health needs, both physical and mental. We did a brief survey and asked them about their experiences of taking puberty blockers. And they've got hormonal imbalances, they've got lasting sexual dysfunction. One person told us that they had osteoporosis before they were even out of their teen years. She said it was as bad as her grandma, who was in her 70s. You know, so these have really serious lasting consequences. And because we know it's a gateway drug, we know it leads to cross-sex hormones, we know it leads to surgeries for nearly 100% of children, it's really an unacceptable risk. I mean, GenSpec was founded by Stella O'Malley, a psychotherapist in Ireland, and Stella actually had gender-related distress from the time when she was a very young child, but because she grew up before puberty blockers had been introduced, she was one of the 80 to 95% of children whose symptoms resolved naturally after puberty. And I know Stella's really grateful for that. She grew up to be comfortable in her body, her puberty wasn't interrupted, she's got a lovely husband and 2 kids. we're taking that opportunity away from so many children by pushing ahead with this trial.
Yeah, I mean, this trial in and of itself could cause infertility in children, could cause them to have sexual problems for the rest of their life. I watched a video this week that went out of a detransitioner in America, a young woman in her late 20s now. As you say, it seems to be about 10 years later after the fact. And she was just talking about her life being destroyed by this. And it was just the most heartbreaking thing. And I think it's more evidence that we're going to see more and more of this.
Yeah, I think so. And, you know, Kira Bell, the very brave and very famous detransitioner, has actually brought a legal case and is pushing for a judicial review of the puberty blocker trial and saying kids can't consent to this. This is an experimental pathway and we just shouldn't go ahead with it.
Well, that's it. But a report came out yesterday in the news that it seems like the government are intent on going through with it, or at least not stopping this trial go ahead. And there was a trial, I didn't know this, but there was a trial 10 years ago or so, 2011, and there was a trial, but they kept the evidence back from it, which goes against the whole point of doing it in the first place.
Yeah, and this is an unfortunate theme in gender medicine. The results of studies that are unfavourable just don't get published, and they sit behind the scenes. And while the results are going unpublished, more children are medicalised. So the early intervention study that you mentioned actually found ultimately that 3/4 of the young people didn't actually improve or actually got worse from taking puberty blockers. Those results were suppressed, and the Gender Identity Development Service just kept right on prescribing blockers. And I think we're in a similar situation with the data linkage study. You know, why would we do a new trial and place new children at risk when we haven't got the results of the data linkage study to find out what happened to the last ones?
And if we're going to have a trial, why don't we have a trial that's not going to harm them, like putting them in therapy?
Yeah.
Dealing with the underlying causes, which have been proven to be massively influenced by having autism or previous abuse or being gay.
Yeah, and I think we can all agree that, you know, gender-distressed young people, the distress that they're experiencing is real, and they need compassionate, ethical, evidence-based support to confront their developmental fears, you know, and grow up to live authentically and with acceptance of their bodies.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much. That was the director of GenSpec UK, Carrie Clark. Thank you, Carrie.